doing? Thank you so much for joining me with another math lesson with Mr. Whitford. I'm very excited to go through the next lesson with you, which is 4.5.2. We'll be covering another concept of one-step equations, specifically multiplying and dividing. So as usual, if you have your worksheet with me, please follow along as we first start off by looking at the bell work. As usual, take a moment right now, pause the video if you need to begin to complete the bell work. There are 4 problems here. This is 4 equations that are similar to the lesson from before. So try to solve them as best you can. Pause the video if you need to. All right. Hopefully you had enough time to go through them. They're not too complicated, but I do want to go through them with you to make sure we have the same exact answers. The first one, as usual, we want to make sure we draw a line down the equal sign, right? We have 3 plus c is equal to 6. I need to get rid of this 3 that's next to the letter c. C is our variable. The way I'm going to get rid of this number 3 is I'm going to do the opposite. Since this is a positive 3, it represents addition or plus 3. I'm going to do the opposite of that, which is subtract 3. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side because it's a balancing scale, right? We talked about that. I'm going to subtract 3 minus 3. That's going to give me 0. I don't have to put 0 there. And it just leaves c on this side. 6 minus 3 is going to give me 3. So my answer here is c is equal to 3. All right. And if you wanted to go through and check it, please feel free to plug it in. 3 plus 3 does give you 6. Is 6 equal to 6? Yes, it is. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Next one, we have x minus 4 equals 2. We would add 4 to both sides because we're going to do the opposite of subtraction. When we do the opposite of subtraction, we end up getting negative 4 plus 4 cancels. We get x by itself. 2 plus 4 gives us 6. And once again, I can go and I can check to make sure the answer makes sense by changing x to 6. So 6 minus 4, does that equal 2? Yes, 2 is equal to 2. Great. I would do the next one. Once again, I see this a minus 8. I'm going to do the opposite of subtracting 8, which is plus 8 to both sides. Okay, be very careful here, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a negative plus a positive. These are different signs. You want to keep the sign of the bigger number here. Okay, so I'm going to end up getting x by itself. Negative 4 plus 8 is going to give me 4. And it's going to stay positive because 8 is positive. Okay, and of course, I can always check to make sure that is true by doing 4 minus 8. Does that equal negative 4? And the answer is yes, it does equal negative 4. Okay. You can always check on the calculator as well once you plug it in. The last one here is w plus 6. We're going to subtract 6 to both sides. Be careful, these are 2 negatives here. We end up with w on the left by itself, and negative 3 minus 6 gives us negative 9. Of course, you can check to make sure that also is correct. All right. These are our one-step equations specific to adding and subtracting. Today, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing to solve one-step equations. We're going to solve one-step equations using something called the multiplicative inverse, and we're going to discuss the rules to solve these one-step equations. Similar to what you did in the bell work, you use the inverse operations, right? The word inverse means opposite, right? So we're going to use the opposite operations to be able to solve for us. So if you see subtraction, we use addition. If we see an addition, we're going to use subtraction. Today, however, we're going to use multiplication and division to solve one-step equations, right? So if you want, let's look quickly at the vocabulary if we need to. Inverse operations, this is a recap. The inverse of multiplication is division. Inverse of addition is subtraction. Inverse of subtraction is addition. And the inverse of division is multiplication, okay? A variable is a symbol for a number that we don't know yet. So it could be a letter, it could be a symbol like a star. In our case, throughout this worksheet, we're going to see letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G to substitute for these unknown numbers, okay? But the goal is by the end of you doing it, by the end of this lesson, the unknown numbers will become known. We'll be able to solve for the variables. The last thing that we're going to include in this worksheet is something called the growth factor, and because I want to show you how this unit ties in with the next unit coming up, which is something called proportional relationships, right? Where there's normally a pattern that needs to be followed. It's called something called the constant, right? But we have to identify a growth factor. So for example, if you look at discovery, I want to ask you this. Given this pattern, given these 2 patterns, what is the growth factor here? So when you look at A, you have 2 goes to 6, goes to 18, goes to 54. What is the growth factor? Now, the growth factor is the number that's being added from one number to the next number in the pattern, all right? Now, because, and I apologize, right? This is actually a typo here, what I'm trying to fix. It's not about being added. This is a number that's being multiplied, right? Multiplied, right? To go from one number to the next number. To go from one number to the next number, okay? We've talked about a little bit of constants and how we can do y divided by x, right? Think about doing the second number divided by the first number or any order like that, and you will get the constant, you will get that number. But my question to you is, looking at these, which is the growth factor? The factor meaning multiplication, to go from 2 to 6, right? What number is being multiplied by 2 to get to 6? What number is being multiplied by 6? I apologize, I meant to put 6 first. To get to 18, right? What is this number? Okay, same thing over here. 24 multiplied by what is going to give us 12? 6 multiplied by what is giving us 3? Notice how this pattern is working. I want to figure out what multiplied to get there, there, and there. And this is a little bit of a prequel into the next unit, but this is how it ties in together. Okay, now I'm hoping that you had a chance. If you want to take a second, pause the video right now, see if you can figure these out. But I want to show you, before I give you the answer, notice that these question marks, instead of me putting question marks there, I could put the letter X, a variable. I could put 6X, a variable. And this is why we're doing one-step equations, because if you can identify that there's a one-step equation here and solve the one-step equation, it would make it easier for you to identify the constant in the next unit, identify the growth factor in the next unit. But these are simple patterns. I'm hoping that when you looked at here, you said to go from 2 to 6, 6 to 18, I multiply by 3, right? And in order for you to figure out this other one here, once again, what do I multiply 24 by to get 12 and to keep going? This is really 24 times x equals 12, and 6 times x equals 3. The answer for this problem is 1/2, right? Right, it's being cut in half. You can see it's being cut in half. It's being divided by 2. 24 divided by 2, divided by 2, divided by 2, right? So that's how we can identify. But Ms. Woodford, what if I can't catch the pattern right away? What if I need help? The way you're going to be able to catch the pattern in the future in the next unit is you're going to be able to solve it using one-step equations. So let's look at the modeling, where I'm going to model for you how to do these one-step equations, and you're going to practice doing them. So that way in the next unit, you'll be able to quickly identify the constant or the growth factor of different patterns and sequences. Okay, so let's do it. We're talking about one-step equations, multiplying and dividing. We're going to use the inverse. Inverse means opposite. So if you see as multiplication, you need to remember the opposite is division. If you see as division, you need to remember the opposite is multiplication. Let me start off with A. When I look at A, I have negative V is equal to 28. Now, what you need to know is that there is a number, first and always, right? We want to make sure we draw a line. This line is to separate the two parts of the equation. Our goal is to solve for the variable. In this case, the variable is the letter V. We need to get V by itself. Now, Mr. Woodford, what do you mean V by itself? It looks like V is already by itself, but there's a subtraction sign in front of it. That's not necessarily a subtraction sign as much as it is a negative sign. So we have negative V by itself, not positive V. We want to get positive V by itself. How do I do that, Mr. Woodford? I tell you this, there is a number that's in front of V here that we need to identify. Whenever you don't see a number in front of a letter, that means that the number there is an invisible 1. Okay, let me say that again. Whenever you don't see a number in front of a letter, such as this right here, that means the number that's there is a 1. So in this case, it's really a negative 1. So we have negative 1V is equal to 28. Our goal was to get V by itself. Okay, Mr. Woodford, what do? Do I add 1 to both sides? And honestly, that's what most of you guys are thinking, most likely. The misconception is that I would have to add 1 to both sides. That is not the case, okay? Because even though it looks like a -1, it's actually a -1, and there's a -1 right next to the letter V. That operation is multiplication. It's saying -1 multiplied by V, and you get -1V, okay? So I need to get rid of multiplication, and the way I'm going to do that is by doing the inverse. Inverse of multiplication is division. Notice I made this nice little line here. That's a division line, right? Dividing by -1. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So I'm going to divide both sides by -1. Now, the -1s are going to cancel out on this side because -1 divided by -1 just gives me a +1V, which is what we want. We want a +1V. Do I have to put 1 in the front there? No, I don't. And for the sake of you guys getting used to it, I'm going to erase that 1 there, okay? But you should know that there is a 1 now in the front. Whenever you don't see it, you should know that there is a 1. 28 divided by -1 is going to give us -28. Okay, we have -28 here. And I'm sorry if it doesn't look like an 8, but that is an 8. Okay. Now, the one thing I want to make sure you understand is this, right? I would like you to get into the habit of checking your work. To check my work, I want to plug in the answer for V. So I have a -1 on the outside, and then I have V, which is also a -28. Is that equal to 28? Do you notice how I made sure I put a -1, then parentheses I put what V was? That's very important, okay? When you're checking it, substitute the letter V, X, Y with the number that you solved. Okay, so I have -1 being multiplied, right? You may not see that a dot there, but whenever you see a number next to parentheses, that means it's multiplying each other, okay? When I multiply these two, I get a +28, and I ask myself, is 28 equal to 28? And that answer is yes, okay? Just a recap, this operation was multiplication, and we know the inverse of multiplication is division. This is inverse, right? Multiplication, we know that's division, okay? Let's quickly do some more of these. Y divided by 5 is equal to -4. As usual, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing a line down the equal sign. This is to separate them to make me realize that these two are two equivalent expressions, okay? I need to say, okay, great. Y divided by 5 is equal to -4. Did you notice how I said that? Y divided by 5? I know that it's a fraction, but I also know that a fraction is really just division, okay? If you need to write this down so you have it as a note. You need to remember that a fraction is really just division. That being the case, right, I want to make sure I get this correct. I want to say, okay, if that's division, I need to do the opposite of division and multiply, okay? But Mr. Whitford, what am I multiplying by? My question to you is, what was it dividing by? It was dividing by 5. So that means I need to multiply by 5. I'm going to multiply this side by 5. I'm going to multiply this side by 5. Okay? When you multiply like that, I really do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. I could write 5y over 5 here. I could write that. But I know that when I go to simplify it, the 5s would just cancel out. So notice what I'm doing. I'm just crossing those 5s out because I'm doing cross cancellation. They will end up canceling out. And we will talk about cross cancellation, I believe, on the next lesson, right? They cancel out. We end up getting y by itself over here, which is what we want. We want to solve for the variable. The variable here is y. We say, okay, -4 times 5, that gives me -20. I'm going to make sure I check my answer. Go back and make sure you check your answer. Check it by plugging it into y. So -20 over 5 is equal to -4. And we want to figure out, is this true? -4 is equal to -4, which means that our answer is correct. Now, on C and D in class, I'm going to ask you guys as students to come on up and to practice and show me you know how to do it in front of your classmates to give them understanding. I'm going to go through it pretty quick right now, all right? So I notice I have 4V. I'm going to draw my line down the equal sign. This means multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. This line represents division. 4 divided by 4 is going to give me 1. I'm left with V by itself. 28 divided by 4 gives me 7. All right, I'm going to check my answer. 4 times 7, does this equal 28? The answer is 28 is equal to 28. That is true. Z divided by 3. Now this is my Z. I'm going to write it a little differently. Notice how I wrote it a little differently. Instead of the division symbol, I wrote it like a fraction because I know a fraction is really just division. And I like the way this looks. It helps me to understand that what I need to do is the opposite. I'm going to multiply it because this is dividing. And I'm going to say, what did it divide by? Divided by 3. So that means I'm multiplying both sides by 3. Remember, you got to multiply both sides by 3. And this is my wall I just drew to separate them. These 3's are going to cancel, leaving me with just the letter Z is equal to -2 times 3, which is -6. Of course, I'm going to check my answer because I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure it's right. -6 divided by 3. Does that equal -2? And the answer is -2 is equal to -2. So my answer is correct. Okay. When you're going to check, if you want to use your calculator to check to make sure it's right, that's okay. I would like to see it on paper. That way I know that you actually checked your answer. But this is a way to make sure that you get every single problem correct. Okay. If there are any questions, as usual, feel free to begin to put them in the actual Google Classroom page, but continue to work on the independent practice as well as your homework. Thank you so much for joining me with another math lesson with Ms. Wilfred. Have a wonderful day.